Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm back again with another walkthrough video, and today I would like to show you In the Name of Odin. Now this is actually a mock-up box, because this is a prototype, and the game will be on Kickstarter, starting either today or tomorrow, depending on when this video goes live. And since this is a prototype, of course, it is due to changes. The artwork seems almost finished, there are some placeholders, there are also some errors on the components, but I'm pretty sure that all of that will be fixed. The game is published by NSKN Games. It is for 2 to 5 players, ages 14 and up, and it plays in about 60 minutes. The designer is, and I'm just hoping I'm not butchering his name too much, Krzysztof Zięba. But what's it all about? As you can hopefully see from the cover and also infer from the title, this is a Viking-themed game. Players are chieftains or jarls of a Viking tribe, trying to get the most fame mainly by raiding and plundering. Mechanically, this is more or less a card game. There are boards to place down cards and there are other resources, but the main mechanics are card drafting, set collection, tableau building, resource collection, and also multi-purpose cards. And what I'd like to do now is show you a full 3-player game. Enjoy!
Okay, I've set up a 3-player game, and as always, let's take a brief look at the components first, and let me mention one last time that these are of course prototype components. And let's start with the board in the middle. This is basically a placeholder for various cards and items. Up here we have heroes and a hero deck. We have the 3 kind of Vikings: blue sailors, red warriors, and green merchants. Then here we have a raid deck, which also serves as a timer. In a 3-player game, it contains 10 cards, and when all the cards are gone, the game will be over. 5 of those cards are already in a display. The display is separated into 3 different sea zones. This one is closest to where we are, then this one is a little bit further, and this one is the farthest. Then we have 3 Viking tokens. I guess in the finished game they will be cardboard tokens that will fit in these spaces. These 2 sea zones receive 1 randomly, and the 3rd one is placed to the side. Down here we have buildings, supply of 4, more in the deck. And then over here we have longships. Over here in the supply we have damage tokens and construction tokens. Up here we have the draw pile for action cards and a offer of 4 cards, 1 more than the number of players. And each action card depicts a Viking symbol in the top corresponding to the Viking meeples, and an action symbol on the bottom. And there are 3 different symbols: recruitment, seamanship, and craftsmanship. Finally, each player receives a player board with a scoring track down here. Victory points in this game are called fame. Everybody has a marker to track those, and it starts at 0. Here we can place a hero once we've hired one. Here we can place our Viking tokens. Up here is a reference for some of the actions in the game. And finally, this is our village with building spots for 5 different buildings and 2 shore spaces where we can put our longships. And finally, everybody starts with a hand of 6 action cards. Blue will also be the start player, and then we can already start. As already mentioned, the game will be over when all the raid cards are gone, and performing raids is one of the main ways in the game to get victory points. A turn consists of 2 phases. First is the action phase, where you can perform as many actions as you can. Usually actions will cost cards, so at some point you run out of cards. And then in the second phase you draw back up to 6 cards. So let's actually take a look at Blue's cards and what you can do with them. Okay, looking at the colors, we see that we have 2 green, 2 red, and 2 blue, so a fair mix. And then we have 2 seamanship, 1 recruit, and 3 craftsmanship. Now we have to decide what we actually want to do with those cards. The thing is that you can use each card either for its Viking symbol or for its action symbol, and most of the actions require that you spend more than 1 card. Now the first possible action that you can do on your turn is exchange 1 card with the offer. And the thing is, we have not much use for this 1 recruitment symbol. We'd rather have a 4th construction or craftsmanship symbol. So let's go up here to the offer and exchange our card for this one. If you want, before exchanging 1 card, you can discard one of your cards to completely wipe the offer, discard all cards and put out 4 new ones. It costs you a card, but if you're desperate and you simply can't get what you want from the offer, then this is a good idea. This action of exchanging 1 card with the offer is something you can only do once on your turn, and you can only also wipe the entire offer once. Now, let's perform our first action. Acquiring a construction token. Construction tokens are basically necessary to actually build a building in the first place, preparing a building site, getting the necessary resources and so on. And the construction tokens get more and more expensive depending on how many construction tokens you have already acquired. Since this would be our first construction token, it costs us 1 craftsmanship symbol. So we just take a card with a craftsmanship symbol and put it on the discard pile and get a token. Now you can have a maximum of 5 construction tokens because you can only have a maximum of 5 buildings. And you can store these tokens on the empty building spaces, but that does not mean that we have to build this building next. Basically, this is just where we put the token now. As a next action, we can actually build a building. This costs 3 craftsmanship symbols, as you can also see here next to the building symbols. And that's exactly what we have left. There are various types. So for example, there are different types of forges, different types of jars, houses. And now we have to decide which one we want to build. They all cost the same, but of course they have different effects. For example, the jars house will give us 1 free recruitment symbol per turn. The shipyard will give us 1 seamanship symbol. And what a shipyard also allows you to do is store an additional longship. Normally you'd only be allowed to store 1. With a shipyard you can store 2. And the forge will give us not 1 recruit symbol, I think this is a misprint, it should be 1 craftsmanship symbol. Finally, the ruling circle will increase our hand size to 7 cards, so basically we can draw 1 extra card each turn. The effects that I just described are similar to all buildings of the same type, so all shipyards will have this symbol, but then each building has 1 individual special ability that is unique. So for example, this shipyard allows us to return longships to our port for only 1 seamanship symbol, and normally that action would cost 2. The thing is, after we've expanded these cards, then we have 2 seamanship symbols remaining, and getting a ship would cost 3. So if we build the shipyard now, that gives us 1 free symbol that we can already use this turn, so we'd actually be able to buy a ship. Let's do that. So, to build a building, we have to give up 3 craftsmanship symbols, plus 1 construction token, and then we can put our shipyard up here, filling in the shipyard slot, so we can only build each building once. And then after we've built our building, we just fill up the offer from the deck, and we have another runic circle. And now with this 1 free symbol that you can use once per turn, we can tilt the card to remember that we've already used it, but since it's our last action, let's not do that. So with 1, 2, 3 symbols, we can build a ship. Now the ships all have different abilities. First, they all have a range, in this case 3 and 2, the number of waves down here, and the range represents how far you can sail. In other words, if you want to perform this raid, you need a ship of range 3, here you need 2 or 3, and here 1, 2 or 3. Also, each ship gives a number of victory points at the end of the game, and buildings also give fame points, I didn't mention that earlier. And usually ships give a special ability, that is, they provide certain symbols on a raid. So, all ships give 2 victory points. These 2 provide a symbol, this one doesn't, but it has a range of 3. This one has a range of 3, it provides any one symbol, as opposed to the others who provide a specific one, but it doesn't give any victory points. But I actually like the flexibility at this point, so let's take this ship. We have to put it at one of our 2 shore spaces, and actually we have activated both, since we have our shipyard. And then we simply refill the offer. We don't have any cards left, so that's the end of our turn. And we draw up to 6 cards, we don't have any cards left, so we draw 6. The green player first decides to swap 1 card with the offer, so this one goes, and he decides to take this one with the craftsmanship symbol. Since this is his only craftsmanship symbol now, he decides to use the card to simply obtain a construction token. Then he has 3 seamanship symbols, so he also wants to build a longship, and he decides to build this one. It is immediately replaced. And then finally he decides to recruit a hero. Each hero needs between 2 and 4 recruitment symbols. So for 2 recruitment symbols he can recruit either one of these. Both have a raid ability that comes into play during a raid. Other heroes might have an ability that is not linked to a raid, like these 2. They each provide a different Viking symbol. Their raid abilities are pretty similar. They provide certain action symbols during a raid. Now, since in the requirements for the current raids, green and red are present about the same, it probably doesn't matter too much which one we chose, so let's just pick this one over here. It goes on our player board in the hero space, and these 2 cards are gone. And then the offer is moved to the right, so the ones that have been longer in the game get cheaper, and we reveal a new one. Then green is already done and draws 6 new cards. Red decides to do pretty much the same. He decides to swap 1 recruit for a ship, get 1 construction token, recruit a hero for 2. So his choice is between these 2. He takes the one that does not have a raid ability, but an ability that can come in handy at other points in the game. And finally he decides to build a ship. Now while these two seem similar, this one simply provides 2 victory points at the end of the game if it's still there, because ships can also get damaged. And this one will simply provide 1 victory point during a raid. So if you plan to do a lot of raiding, this one probably seems better. So let's take this one. Back to blue. These are his cards, and now of course we have to figure out what to do. We actually have 3 construction symbols, which would be enough to build a building, but we also need a construction token first, and it would already cost us 2. So this is simply impossible because we can only switch 1 card per turn, and even if there were any craftsmanship symbols in the offer, we would only be able to obtain 1. We could, with our 2 seamanship symbols here and our 3rd one up here, build a second boat. So let's actually do that. Since we went with a ship that does not provide victory points previously, let's now take one that does. It can go into our second spot, since we have a shipyard. Of course, we could always say we're done, simply draw 2 cards and hope that we get enough building symbols to construct a building in the next turn, but there's still stuff we can do. Let's recruit a hero, so we need to exchange 1 card. Let's take this one and exchange it for any one of the recruitment cards. Pay 2 recruitment to recruit either of these 2 heroes. Let's go with him. And I'll explain these raid symbols as soon as we actually perform a raid, of course. And then we have 2 cards remaining, and with these let's actually gather some Vikings. Here you look at the symbols and you turn in 1, 2 or 3 symbols of the same kind, and then you get 1, 3 or 6 Viking meeples of that color. So for 2 blue symbols we'll get 3 blue Vikings, sailors, and we can store them over here. And these are actually the requirements for the raids. So for example, with 3 blue Vikings, we're well underway to perform this raid. And then blue simply draws back up to 6 cards. Green first decides to take this card. Then he has 3 craftsmanship symbols. The construction token is gone and can build another building. He decides to build the Charles house, which is replaced by, it says runic circle, but here we have to go by the picture and the special ability. This one is actually an inn. Then he decides to play 2 cards with green symbols to gather 3 trader Vikings. And then the green player decides to go on a raid. That is a bit risky since he has only 1 card left in his hand, and we'll see in a minute why. But he decides to get in on the raiding game early on to grab some points before the other players do. Requirements for a raid is that you have a hero and a ship. He has both of that. First of all, he has to declare which card he is trying to raid. By the way, I think in the finished game these cards will also have names, so he could be raiding a trade route or an island or something. And he decides to raid this one. Then he has to choose a longship. He only has 1. We have to see whether the range fits. The longship has a range of 3. In this sea zone we only need 1, so we're good. And then he has to expend Vikings to match all the symbols on the cards. 1 blue symbol. He doesn't have any sailors, but the Charles house says that all heroes have an additional blue symbol. So his hero now has a red and a blue one. So these 2 are taken care of. And for these 2 green symbols, he can simply expand 2 green Vikings and they return to the supply. Now what happens next is that the raid requirements are modified, and for this each other player in turn order gets a chance to play 1 action card, although after each player had the chance to play 1 card, we will reveal cards from the face down stack until there's 3 revealed. So if the other players say they don't want to play a card, he'll have to deal with 3 cards anyway, but the other players could deliberately try to make it harder for him by playing specific cards. The red player decides to play this card, and in this case the colors don't matter, it's the action symbols. So the green player will have to provide another ship, we'll see how that works in a minute, to successfully complete the raid. Blue also decides to play a card, so we still need 1 card from the deck. And here we go. Now the green player can play up to 3 cards with matching symbols to get rid of these symbols. He cannot use his buildings because the buildings are at home and he's away on the raid. First of all, he decides to play this card. It has a ship symbol, so one of the ship symbols is removed. And 2 remaining cards mean that he would get 1 less point. So since this raid is only worth 3 to begin with, he'd only get 2. If 3 cards are remaining, then you lose 2 points. If 1 is remaining, you don't lose any points. And if no cards are remaining, you'll actually get an additional fame point. However, his hero has the ability that for the purpose of the current raid, he gets 1 ship and 2 craftsmanship symbol, and the 1 ship would get rid of this one. However, using hero ability means that the hero is discarded and he'd have to get another one, and so the question is whether that's worth it. he decides that it is not worth to discard the hero for that. So as it stands, for 2 cards, he'll lose 1 point. So he still gets 2. He gets this card and keeps it face down for the end of the game. Then he has to damage his longship. Each damage reduces the range of the ship by 1. And if a ship has sustained as much damage as it had range in the beginning, then the ship is destroyed. Also, the ship is now away from port, since it was on a raid. So it is actually flipped down, and we have to expend resources to flip it back up again. Then we have to refill a raid for this spot. And then each of the players who actually played a card during our raid receives a replacement. So they start their turn with 6 cards again. So actually playing a card into another player's raid is a great way to get rid of a card that you don't want or don't need for your next turn, in hopes of getting a better one. And then the raid is over. Green decides to end his turn, so it draws back up to 6 cards. Red decides to discard a card to refill the entire offer. He swaps 1 card. He discards 3 of them to be able to build a building. That'll cost him his construction token. He decides to get a forge. As I already mentioned, the forge provides a craftsmanship symbol, not a recruitment symbol. But the effect of this one is that he immediately gains a new construction token. And then for 2 blue cards, he decides to get 3 sailors. Blue decides to get 6 red Vikings, 6 warriors. And then he decides to declare a raid on this raid card here. Since it's at range 3, you'll have to use this longship, because this one has not enough range. Then he needs 1 Viking and another one, since there's a blue token in this region, so 2 blue ones that you can pay like this. Then we need 2 green ones. We can get 1 green one from our ship and another one from our hero, so we're good. And then we still need 3 red ones. Okay, then other players can play cards. Both players decided to play a card. We get a 3rd one from the deck, and we're looking at 1 of each. And blue is lucky because he had exactly that left in his hand. So all these cards are discarded. We'll get +1 fame. The card itself is worth 5, +2 because it's in the rightmost sea zone, plus another one for a total of 8 fame. Then the Viking token that was in the space with the raid is replaced by the one next to the board. Then all the raids move over to the right, and the new one is revealed. Then the other players receive their replacement card. Our longship receives the damage and would be exhausted. However, our shipyard allows us to return longships to port for 1 seamanship instead of 2, and we still have 1 seamanship symbol remaining that we didn't use this turn, so we can immediately recall it to port, but it still has a damage that we'll need to repair, and repairing damage costs 2 seamanship as well. Then blue is done, and since the pile just ran out, we have to reshuffle. Green decides to swap a card. Then for 2 craftsmanship symbols, he can get his 2nd construction token. Then he pays 2 seamanship to recall his ship to port. It still has the 1 damage on it, but it still has a range of 2 remaining. And finally he decides to get 3 green Vikings. Red exchanges a card. Then he only needs to spend 2 craftsmanship symbols, because he gets 1 from the forge. He spends his construction token, and he builds a runic circle. His hand size is now 7, and once per turn he can use craftsmanship or recruit as seamanship. And finally he takes 6 green Vikings. Now he can ever only store a total of 10 Vikings, so he's very close to the limit. However, once you have an inn, that limit is raised to 14. He still has 1 card left, so he only draws 5. Blue first decides to get his 2nd construction token. Then he decides to swap this card with one that has seamanship. And together with his free symbol, he decides to repair the damage of his longship. Then he takes 3 blue Vikings. Then he only has 1 card left, but since he's so much ahead, he decides to raid anyway. He decides to go for the one all the way over here. So once again, he has to take this ship. He needs 3 blue. 2 green. One's on the ship. The other one is on his hero. And 1 plus another for 2 red. Then the other players can play cards. Since he only has 1 card left, and he can only get these symbols if he sacrifices his hero, the 2 players played 2 ships. So this is what we're looking at. The blue player can discard 1 card from his hand to get rid of this one, but he cannot do anything about those 2, which means he'll get 1 point less. So normally it would have been 5 plus 2 is 7, so he only gets 6 points. So he's now at 14. The red meeple is swapped against the blue one once again. Move the cards over, reveal a new one. The other players get the replacement card, and the ship is currently unavailable and also has damage. And then blue is done. Green first builds a building, a shipyard. This one allows him to store 2 extra ships, so actually he can now store up to 3. Then with the free symbol on here and 2 more, he decides to build a new ship. He goes for the most valuable one, so it's now a chore. And then he decides to keep this card, so he only draws 5. By spending 2 cards plus the symbol from his forge, the red player gets his 3rd construction token. And then he decides to perform this raid. It's in the 2nd zone. His ship has a range of 2. He needs 2 blue Vikings, 3, 4 green ones, and 1 red one. That is provided by his ship. And so the other players can play their cards. Actually, neither player decided to play a card, so to get 3 from the deck. The red player can match 2 of them, so he'll neither get positive or negative fame. He will get 5, plus 1, plus another one from his ship is 7. As usual, this one is switched against this one. These slide over, we get a new one. We're almost through the deck, but for the game to be over, all the raids have to be gone. And of course the ship becomes unavailable and damaged. And then he uses 2 ships to recall this one, but it's still damaged and thus only has a range of 1. Blue builds a building. He builds a Charles house. So his heroes all have an additional green symbol, so he's actually 2. Then he uses his free ship symbol to return this one to port, of course with the ability of the shipyard. And then he collects 6 blue Vikings. Green collects 3 warriors and 3 sailors. And then he uses 2 seamanship symbol plus the free one from his shipyard to build the ship. And then he's done. Red first exchanges a card. Then he uses the free hammer that he gets from the forge in the rune circle. And with that ability he can treat it as a ship. And with the second ship he can repair his longship. Then he decides to get 6 warriors. Then he uses his hero's ability, which says you may exchange any number of Vikings of one type with the same number of Vikings of another type. So he decides to give up 2 warriors and get 2 sailors. Then it also says that he gets 1 victory point, 1 fame, and then the hero is discarded. Then by paying 2 recruit, he decides to get another hero, this one. And then he decides to go on this raid, which is once again possible with this ship. He needs 3 blue, 1 green, and a total of 3 red. 1 is provided by his ship, 1 by his hero, so he only needs to pay an additional 1. Then the others may play cards. They both decided to play a ship, plus 1 additional card. He's unlucky, he can't match any of them, so he'll get minus 2 points. The card itself is worth 5, plus 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7, minus 2 is 5. So he's at 13. The ship gets exhausted and receives damage. The token is once again swapped. The last card is put into play, so we're halfway through the raids. With his free symbol and another seamanship, Blue repairs his longship. Since he wants range 3 for this raid, he'll need 5 blue, a green one that is provided by his hero, and a red one that is provided by the ship. So the other players can once again play their cards. Here's what the others played, and this one is revealed from the stack. Blue decides to sacrifice his hero that provides him with 2 recruit and 1 craftsmanship. So these 2 are gone, which still leaves a seamanship symbol. And he decides to discard a card for that. So all cards are gone, so he actually gets a bonus of 1 for a total of 8. So he's now at 22. Then he decides to use these 2 to repair the damage. And with these recruit symbols, plus a 3-1 from here, he recruits another hero. And then he's done. Green first constructs a building. It's an inn. He can now stop to 14 Vikings, and after any raid he may keep 1. Then he decides to perform this raid. He picks this ship. It has range 2, so that's sufficient. He needs 1 blue. The 1 blue is provided by the Charles house, and 2 green, and he pays the green, plus another green for the token. Then he needs 4 red. 1 is provided by his ship, another by his hero, So he still needs to pay 2. And let's keep the ones he paid over here because he's able to keep 1. So the requirements are fulfilled. Other players get to play cards. So we're looking at this. Since that is exactly what his hero provides, he decides to sacrifice him. So he gets a bonus point for a total of 7 points. So he's now at 9. And he decides to take back a red 1 for the ability from his inn. But his turn is not over yet. He decides to use 1 recruit plus a free 1 over here to hire this guy for 2. By the way, if you hire the guy over here for 4 recruit points, you also receive 1 victory point. And then he decides to raid once again here. So he has to take this ship with a range of 3. He needs 1 blue. That is provided by his hero. And this is a passive ability, so it works all the time and not just once per turn. And 4 red. 1 is provided by the ship, the other 1 by his hero, and you can pay the other 2. So it's once again up to the other players to play their cards. So green has to face these 3 cards. He can at least get rid of the 2 ships for a total of 5. And he decides to go again. He has to use his remaining ship, so he can only go for this raid. He needs 3 blue. Again, he has a free symbol here, so he needs to pay 2. He needs a green. And the red one is provided by his hero. So once again, the other players can play cards. Since green doesn't have any hand cards left, and his hero does not provide a raid ability, he cannot do anything about it. He gets -2 points. Still gives him 2 out of 4 points. Now, we don't have to switch this one back in because this is the only raid left. This ship will receive its 2nd damage and is exhausted. That does not impact scoring. Red, unfortunately, cannot do the last raid because his ship, even if it were repaired, only had a range of 2. So first of all, he uses these 2 cards plus his forge to build yet another building. He takes the inn, that whenever he recruits Vikings, he gets an extra green one. And gathering Vikings is exactly what he does, because they will give points at the end of the game as well. So he recruits 3 blue, 3 red, 1 green. Since this is an ability that enhances a specific action, gathering Vikings, it only works once per turn, so overall he only receives 1 extra green meeple. Nevertheless, that was a good turn. Blue first uses his free longship and the smash ability to return this ship to port. Then the thing is, if he performs the last raid, and he very much intends to do so, then the game will be immediately over after that, and he cannot play his other cards, so he has to play it beforehand. So he decides to hire 3 blue, 3 green, and 1 red Viking, which basically puts him at his maximum capacity of 10. Then he declares the raid with this ship. He needs 3 blue. 1 is provided by his hero, so he has to pay another 2. And then he needs 2 green. 1 is provided by the ship, and the other one by his hero, thanks to this ability. Then it's the other's turn to play cards. Let's just say they pass, and we draw 3 from the stack. And basically the question is there one that this one matches? No. So he loses 2 points, but still the points he will get from these Vikings is better than the potential difference of 3 points in the best case if he had been able to get rid of all the cards. -2 is offset by this, so he only gets 3 points. That puts him at 25, and then the game is immediately over. So for final scoring, everybody gets the fame points from the buildings in their village. So blue gets another 7, and is now at 32. Green gets 10, and is now at 21. Red gets 5, and is now at 18. Then for the ships, blue gets 2. Damage and unavailability does not matter, so green gets another 4. Red doesn't get anything. Then 3 Vikings of the same color give 1 point, so blue has 3 blue and 3 green for 2 points. Green has nothing. Red gets 4 points. And finally each set of 3 different Vikings, and you can use Vikings for both criteria, gives another point. So that's another 2 points for blue. Again, nothing for green, and 3 points for red. So final scores are 25 for green and 25 for red. The tiebreaker is whoever has performed the least amount of raids. So red is actually second place and find blue at 38 points, making him the overall winner. And that was one full 3-player game of In the Name of Odin.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed this overview of In the Name of Odin. Hopefully you could see that this is a rather easy game to play. The rules are not complicated, but on the other hand, through the card selection mechanism, it offers us a lot of choices, and there are also multiple strategies to go for, although raiding on the first turn with an almost empty head is probably not one of them. So you should not take this video as strategy advice, but I hope you still got a very good idea now of how the game plays, of the general flow and the decisions you have to make, and also the multiple options you have on each turn due to the card action mechanism. I should note that, as you've seen, I've basically played the entire hands for the players on each of their turns, rarely holding back any cards, maybe one at most, but that doesn't have to mean that this is a good idea and the only way to go. So hopefully with this overview you can now decide whether this is a game you'd like to purchase, either on the Kickstarter or through any other means. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. And also, as soon as I have the link for the Kickstarter, you will be able to find it in the show notes. Then, as always, thanks for watching, have fun playing, and until next time, bye bye!